Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another history of a old First Division team. This time, it's the history of Manchester United. And of course, Manchester United have had some glorious, of a glorious past history of winning trophies. Let's start with the in 1958 Munich air crash tragedy, which took the lives of many of the Busby Babes, as were called then, took the lives of many of them while Manchester United were playing in Europe for the first time. They were returning from a match when they played Red Star Belgrade, and unfortunately, they were in Munich and they took off in bad weather, and unfortunately, the aircraft crashed. Uh, It's the lives of many up and coming Busby Babes, even a local lad, Duncan Edwards. He came from Dudley here in the West Midlands. So if you're ever in this part of the world and you happen to be from another part of the country and you ever find yourself in Dudley in the West Midlands, you'll see a statue of him in the town. And of course, that tragedy has never been forgotten by Manchester United. They always remember it in February when the tragedy occurred. Like I've said, it took the many lives of the Busby Babes. It even Sir Matt Busby at the time, who was manager of Manchester United, he was in hospital for a long while. And it also nearly took the life of Bobby Charlton. But of course, Manchester United's glory years would be in the start of the 1960s. The start of that decade, they already had Bobby Charlton, and they also signed Dennis Law from Huddersfield Town. And they won the FA Cup in 1963. That was the first trophy they won. But, but there was a missing piece to that great Manchester United team of the 60s. Matt Busby and his scouting team spotted a young coming lad named George Best. And as they say, the rest was history. When Manchester United signed Georgie Best, and the holy trinity of Charlton, Law, and Best was born. What a player those Manchester United had at the time. What players they had. You had Charlton, Law, and I like I say, Georgie Best. And there was others as well. You had Alec Stephanie, who was in goal, and you had Nobby Styles. He was playing for England, but Georgie Best, what a player he was. It's just unfortunately that he let himself go later in his career. But it's just a pity that Georgie Best in future World Cups, he couldn't have graced a World Cup. His skills would have lit up a World Cup. He didn't ever play in a World Cup because he was from Northern Ireland. Manchester United won their first old First Division title in 1965, and then they won it again in 1967. and you had George Best winning the European Footballer of the Year award. He was crowned that. And in 1968, they became the first British team to win the European Cup. The Celtic won it in 1967. Manchester United beat Benfica 4-1 at Wembley after extra time. And also, your Benfica at that time included the great Eusebio. He used to play for Benfica and he used to play for Portugal. And then the dominance of Manchester United started in the 60s. As we got towards the end of the 60s, into the 70s, Sir Matt Busby decided that he wanted to retire and they moved him upstairs. So they brought in Wilf McGuinness. He was the reserve team coach for Manchester United reserves. Unfortunately, the start of the 1969-70 season, Manchester United only finished 8th, and the following season, the start of the 70-71 season, they didn't have a very good start to the season. They didn't have a very good start to the season. So they asked Sir Matt Busby, to return to managing Manchester United, and Wilf McGuinness went back to coaching the reserves. At the start of the 70s, Manchester United should have, that decade, they should have won more trophies. They should have won the whole First Division title as well then in the 70s. They had the players, the likes of Carlton, Law, and Best. They could have won the old First Division title again, but they didn't. Although, even though they had both players, they could have done it. And it was decided that Sir Matt Busby, he retired at the end of the 70-71 season. He was replaced by Leicester City's manager, Frank O'Farrell, and that was in 1972, 71-72. And he's managing Manchester United. He didn't last long. He was replaced in the December of 1972 by Tommy Docherty, who then led Manchester United to winning the FA Cup in 1977. But going back to Frank O'Farrell's time as Manchester United's manager, that's when Georgie Best started to go off the rails. So the stories go. He was late. He wouldn't show up for training, and he was becoming a problem. And of course, which led to Frank O'Farrell, like I've just said, being sacked. His reign as Manchester United manager didn't last long. Frank O'Farrell, he used to manage Leicester City. And of course, he took Leicester City to the 1969 FA Cup final when they were beat by Manchester United's neighbours, Manchester City. After Frank O'Farrell was sacked, they turned to Tommy Docherty, and he didn't last too long either. He won the FA Cup for them in 1977, but after that they sacked him, and they appointed former Chelsea's manager, Dave Sexton, to manage Manchester United. He lasted until 1981, when Ron Atkinson joined them from my team, Albion. And then, of course, they He won them the FA Cup in 1985. But after that, the year after that, the next year, 1986, he was sacked. And then, of course, the legendary Sir Alex Ferguson took over. And of course, in his first season as Manchester United's manager, the fans wanted him sacked. And look what happened. How many old Premier League titles he won for them. But going back to Manchester United in the 70s, like I said, the early start of the 70s, they didn't have a very good start to the decade. And of course, in the 1973-74 season, they were relegated from the old First Division, and it was a former Manchester United player, Denis Law, who was playing for Manchester City at the time. His goal relegated Manchester United to the old Second Division. But of course, Manchester United were only spent one season in the old Second Division. That was the 74-75 season, and they came back up again. And the following year, in 1976, they were at Wembley. They played Southampton. Of course, Southampton were the underdogs in that time, that final, and they beat Manchester United to win the FA Cup. But the following year, in 1977, Manchester United won the cup. They beat Liverpool 2-1. But like I've said, Manchester United in the 70s, this towards the end of the 60s and the 70s, they had the players like Bobby Charlton, Denis Law, and Georgie Best. They could have won more trophies, but unfortunately they didn't with the players they'd got. They could have won the old First Division trophy a lot of more, but they didn't. But like I've said, it's a pity Georgie Best couldn't have played in a World Cup. What a player he would have been to actually see to play in a World Cup. But pity he couldn't grace a World Cup, particularly the 1970 World Cup, along with Pele and the other great players for the World Cup of that summer. But like I've said, at the time he started to we started to play up. He would never turn up for training, and of course he had a drinking problem. So I suppose the night before when he was due to report to training, he had a few too many, and like I've said, there was that Manchester United were having trouble with him, and of course eventually he left Manchester United to play in North America, their first attempt at soccer, as they call it. And then, of course, he joined Fulham. He had a spell there. Well, anyway, that's the end of this history of another old First Division team. And I'll see you all again in another one.